Okay, so we're going to be focusing on how do we know the Quran is divinely inspired. So a lot of critics against Islam, the Quran, the Prophet Muhammad would say, well, Muhammad made up the Quran and Islam for self-serving purposes. They always bring up like why should we believe in Muhammad and what proof does Muhammad have to vindicate his prophethood? Otherwise, he's a false prophet who was making up Islam for you know self-serving verses, self-serving reasons or whatever. So critics always say, well, Muhammad can't be a prophet because he provided no evidence for his prophethood. Therefore, Islam is false and based on Muhammad's own um, Muhammad's own thinking or whatever. So they say the Quran is not divinely inspired and Muhammad is a false prophet, etc. So the question really arises, what evidence do we have that Islam or the Quran is true or that Muhammad is a true prophet? We have prophecies, miracles of Prophet Muhammad, and scientific accuracy of the Quran. So let's focus on the prophecies of Islam or the prophecies of the Quran. So the most famous prophecy of the Quran, which came true, is found in the Quran chapter 30, which I have on the screen there. Quran chapter 30 says, Quran chapter 30 verses 2 to 4 says, the Romans have been defeated in a nearby land, yet following their defeat they will triumph within 3 to 9 years. The whole matter rests with Allah before and after victory, and on that day the believers will rejoice at the victory willed by Allah. He gives victory to whoever He wills, for He is the Almighty, the most merciful. So I want to draw attention to this prophecy. The Romans has been defeated in a nearby land, yet following their defeat they will triumph within 3 to 9 years. The whole matter rests with Allah before and after victory, and on that day the believers will rejoice. So the Quran is prophesying that although the Romans have been defeated, after their defeat they will be victorious or they will triumph within 3 to 9 years. So did this prophecy come true? And another prophecy in this verse is, and on that day the believers will rejoice. So what does that mean? That on that day the believers will rejoice. It means that the Prophet Muhammad and the early Muslims will prevail or they'll be victorious over the pagan Meccans in the Battle of Badr. And this prophecy did come true as the Prophet Muhammad was victorious. The early Muslims were victorious over the pagan Arabs in the Battle of Badr. That was their big victory over the enemies of Islam, the early enemies of Islam. But I want to focus on the prophecy on Rome, or the prophecy of the Romans. So, it says, yet following their defeat, they will triumph within 3 to 9 years. So if we go to Tafsir Ibn Kathir, let's see here. If we go to Tafsir Ibn Kathir, he says, he writes that this prophecy was fulfilled. It says, Abu Bakr said, this was a bet between, the Quraysh and Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr was one of the disciples of the Prophet Muhammad. And he said, this is before betting has been forbidden. So Abu Bakr and the idolaters, which are the, pagan Arabs, made a bet. They said to Abu Bakr, what do you think bid means? Something between 3 to 9 years, so let us agree on the middle. So they agreed on 6 years. Then 6 years passed without the Romans being victorious. So the idolaters took what they had bet with Abu Bakr. When the 7th year came, the Romans were finally victorious over the Persians. The Muslims rebuked Abu Bakr for agreeing to 6 years. He said, because Allah said in bid years. At that time, many people became Muslim. This was narrated by Al-Tirmidhi, and he said this is a Hasan Hadith. So I want to draw attention to this part. When the 7th year came and the Romans were finally victorious over the Persians. So according to Ibn Kathir, who was one of the most orthodox, one of the most orthodox commentators of the Quran. Ibn Kathir is a very important commentator on the Quran. he says that 7 years passed and the Romans were finally victorious over the Persians. So this Quranic verse, these Quranic verses were revealed in 615 CE. 7 years after this verse was revealed, the Romans were victorious over the Persians. It was called the Heraclius campaign of 622, where Heraclius was made a counter offensive measure against the Persians, who have overturned most of the eastern province of the Byzantine Empire. What followed next is not entirely clear, but Heraclius certainly won a crushing victory over the Persian Empire somewhere in Caprivola. So basically, this prophecy did come true. The key factor was Heraclius' discovery of hidden Persian forces responding to an ambush. Basically, if you want to go into, I'm trying to keep this video short, but if you look up Heraclius campaign of 622, the Romans were victorious over the Persians 7 years after that Quranic verse was revealed. And if you want the scholarship, it's all these people. It's the references are over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and here's the bibliography. So my point is, this prophecy did come true according to secular history books, and according to Tafsir ibn Kathir, who was collecting earlier material from the Muslims and compiling it into his Tafsir book or his commentary. So this prophecy of the Quran came true 7 years after these verses were revealed. It says, Ibn Kathir writes, when the 7th year came, the Romans were finally victorious over the Persians. So this prophecy of the Quran, where it talks about the Romans, so when it talks about the Romans defeating the Persians, came true, because the Quran says, yet following their defeat, they will triumph within 3 to 9 years. So it fits the time frame, because the Romans were victorious over the Persians, finally victorious over the Persians, 7 years after the Quran chapter 6 verse, after the Quran chapter 30 was revealed, 7 years after. Again, in Heraclius campaign of 622, as we see right here. So, during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, the Romans and the Persians were fighting in, the upper lands, like in Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Iraq. They were fighting in the Levant area. So, the Quran prophesies that the Romans would be victorious over the Persians, over the Iranians or the Persians, and the prophecy did come true 7 years later. So the Quran the author of the Quran only had like a 1 out of 2 chance of getting this prophecy right, because the wars could have just like ended with nobody winning, or the war could have continued with the Persians winning, but the wars continued after the Quran chapter 30 was revealed, and the wars kept going on for many years after the Quran chapter 30 was revealed, and 7 years after the Quran was revealed, the Romans were finally victorious in Heraclius' campaign of 622, as secular history shows, and this fits the time frame. The Quran says they will triumph within 3 to 9 years, so this fits the time frame of the prophecy. The prophecy had a time frame of 3 to 9 years, and the prophecy came true 7 years after the Quran chapter 30 was revealed, so it fits that 3 to 9 year time frame. So the Quran's prophecy came true. So this is just one of the many reasons. This is just one of the few reasons to believe that the Quran could not have been authored by Muhammad, and some divine source who had some source that had knowledge of the future influence the Quran's verses, because this prophecy did come true 7 years after these verses were revealed in that 3 to 9 years. So if Muhammad was really making up the Quran, why would he include a prophecy that could very easily be, refuted, or could very easily be proven false? So, if Muhammad was a false prophet, he made a very daring prophecy, or he made a prophecy that could have either passed or failed, and it could have very easily disproved this prophethood if the Persians won, or if the wars just stopped completely, if the Romans and Persians just stopped fighting one another, or if the Persians won, this would have completely disproved the Quran, or this would have disproved Muhammad's prophethood. But the Romans and Persians continued to fight years after these verses were revealed, and in the seventh year, the Romans were victorious. And not only that, but the Romans kept defeating the Persians after Heraclius' campaign of 622, making the Romans victorious over the Persians in the Roman and Persian wars that were happening during the ministry of the Prophet Muhammad. And this prophecy is also very interesting. It says, "On that day, the believers will rejoice at their victory willed by Allah." So, if you read Tafsir ibn Kathir, it's talking. Well, let me get into Tafsir ibn Kathir real quick. It says, let's see here. Where is it? I'm trying to get to that verse where, on that day the believers will rejoice with the help of Allah. The Quraysh, on the other hand, wanted the Persians to prevail because neither of them were people who followed the book and believed in the resurrection. Hang on, I'm trying to get to the other prophecy. Where is it? Okay. All right, never mind. Let's just focus on the. My point is, this prophecy. Hang on one second. This prophecy is talking about the Battle of Badr, according to other tafsirs or other commentaries of the Quran. But I can't find it in this Tafsir ibn Kathir. Maybe it's there in other commentaries of the Quran. But let's just focus on one prophecy here, and that's the Roman defeats, the Roman victory over the Persians in 622, which is 7 years after these verses were revealed. And what's very interesting is it fits the 3 to 9 year time frame that the Quran says. The Quran gives it a specific time frame, and in Heraclius, or the Romans were victorious over the Persians 7 years after, so it fits that time frame very interestingly. So the Quran made an accurate. So the Quran's prophecy of the Romans beating the Persians, or defeating the Persians, came true 7 years after, fitting that 3 to 9 year time frame. And what's more interesting is that the Romans were victorious over the Persians, for many years to come, until the Roman victory was prevalent, or was permanent with the Persians. So the Romans beat the Persians over and over after Heraclius' campaign of 622 CE. And this is, secular sources confirming. These aren't Muslim sources confirming this, or Christian sources confirming this. Secular sources who have no Muslim or Christian axe to grind, confirming that, that the Romans were victorious over the Persians. So this is one of the many reasons to believe in the prophethood of Muhammad, and that Muhammad was a true prophet because his prophecies came true, and that the Quran is divinely inspired because the Quran's prophecies came true, or the Quran's prophecy came true, thus giving us reason to believe that the Quran is divinely inspired and Muhammad is a true prophet because his prophecies came true. And we know that according to the Bible, according to Deuteronomy 18, a prophet can only be a prophet if his prophecies come true. And the Prophet Muhammad's prophecy definitely, the Prophet Muhammad's prophecy of the Romans beating the Persians within 3 to 9 years came true. And, the Romans were continuously victorious over the Persians for years to come. So this is just a very interesting prophecy, and this is one of the evidences for Islam, or one of the proofs of prophethood. So we can believe in Muhammad's prophethood because his prophecies came true. Stay tuned, more videos coming up ahead.